I hope you're ready for some illogic. On the Wooper Club League channel, we're going over the finals for Season 7 of the Wooper Club League, and boy was this season a blast. A quick history lesson first, Season 1 of the league was a Monotype League, where everyone picked a type at the beginning of the season to face off against each other. Season 2, my introductory season, we made it significantly more complicated, playing best 2 out of 3s with rotating types before settling on 3 for the playoffs. This season, we went back to our roots with another Monotype season, but with a Gym Leader Challenge twist proposed by one of our admins, Cat Measles. In this league, we have both attacked and defended gyms to collect badges before facing off in our own Pokemon League, the winner of which would get the chance to run through an Elite Four gauntlet consisting of the best defensive teams and trainers to become a true champion. We start off with a single ones through selection of defensive gym types, solidifying our gym typings we would use to defend against the offensive teams. We'll get back to that in a moment, as the next step was to draft our offensive teams of 7. Yes, while most draft leagues give you 11 options, we thought it would make it more challenging to pick from a smaller offensive selection that could force you to have more weaknesses to a gym team you were challenging. We also eliminated any tier structure, engaging in a free-for-all picking spree of the best mons we allowed. After making our selections, the 16 teams were split up into 2 conferences of 8, roughly even in skill levels, and we set off to forge our gym teams. For our defensive teams, we got to create 11 sets for 11 Pokemon that we could select for each gym defense. A couple things of note are that while species clause existed in battle, we did not have to have 11 unique species to pick from. That is, while the sets had to remain the same throughout the season, the challenger may not know which set it will be. For example, our Steel Gym Leader needed to bring Heatran every week for the Fire immunity, so he crafted 2 separate Heatran sets among his 11 available Pokemon, one more offensive and one more defensive, so that he didn't have to bring the same Heatran every single defense. The other small bit of leeway for our gym leaders was the ability to change held items. A gym leader's physically offensive Aegislash, for example, may want to run Life Orb, or perhaps a weakness policy, or maybe a spell tag, maybe even a choice band, even if he has a Sword Stance in a move slot. That was about as much wiggle room as we were given as gym leaders, but it certainly fit the aesthetic we were looking for, with 11 distinct Pokemon that we had available as gym leaders and wouldn't outfit with items until our next opponent came forth. Speaking of, the schedule was 8 weeks long and consisted of the 2 conferences facing off head-to-head, each week attacking and defending gyms against the same opponent. After 8 weeks, 6 of us finished with 8 gym badges, and the final 2 playoff and gym league slots went to 2 trainers who acquired 7. In the first round, we had a couple of matchups of Titans, as Cat Measles went down against SteveChuck in a battle of the admins, and Chad and I had a rematch of the season's 2, 3, and 6 finals, though Chad finally took me down this time to move on himself. John was able to defeat Elf Owls in a thrilling match, and in the Battle of Joey's, Joe 8 took down newcomer and member of my front office, Sazbo. In the semifinals, SteveChuck won the sibling battle over Joe 8, and Chad took down John to reach, very fittingly, a Season 1 finals rematch between SteveChuck and Chad. The winner has to go through the Elite Four consisting of the other's gym team, SteveChuck's Dragon Gym, or Chad's Psychic Gym, as well as newcomer Michael's Fire Gym, John's Poison Gym, and the defensive team that ended the season with 5 successful defenses at the top, my Water Gym. I definitely think these 2 offensive teams are the best representatives to square off in this finals match, so why don't we take this time to chat with them about the teams they're bringing and what they're preparing for. It's the WCL Season 7 Finals. Alright, we're going to start off the interviews with Chad here. Chad, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm outstanding. It's a weird position for me not to be in the finals, but if there's anyone more familiar with the finals, it is you. This is Season 7 of the Wooper Club League, and this is your 5th finals appearance. How did this season overall go for you? What do you think about this season in general?
I think it went pretty well. It was an interesting format, definitely the gym leader thing. My only main issue with the format was basically in order to get in the playoffs, you had to win literally all your gym leader matches, which was a little annoying. But I think that's that can be kind of interesting. The draft was certainly interesting because you have to prepare for both monotype teams essentially, and then for the playoffs. So I think a lot of people revolve their strategy around okay, this team has to be as good as it can be versus monotype that I can win all my matches, but I also have to have a good matchup versus the teams that I'll probably be playing in the playoffs, which honestly, maybe I didn't put as much thought into that as I should, but I still had a lot of fun with my team.
Absolutely. It seemed like a lot of these successful teams were very polar in the way that they functioned, right? I see your team being very fast, and I see teams like SteveChuck and Cat Measles, who had very slow teams overall, and they were built to be able to say, if I know exactly what I'm going up against, there's no issue, right? And your team be able to just kind of plow through anything, even if you know what's coming. That really helps out a lot, and of course that helped out in our match in the quarterfinals. So now that we've gotten into the playoff section and it's just offense versus offense, how are you feeling overall about your matchup against SteveChuck here in the finals? You can see on the bottom right, he's got a Baroscuda, Gengar, Dragonite, Necrozma, Clefable, Blissey, and Ferrothorn. Very fat team.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel relatively well. There's two things that stood out to me immediately about his team. One is no electric immunity, which is, my team obviously has a lot of electric offensive presence with Tapu Koko and Regieleki.
That's been like a defining force, I would say, of your team all season. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, maybe I leaned a little too hard into the electric because it is kind of annoying, and we sort of saw this in our match and in some other matches where if the team has one ground type, I essentially have to like play really conservatively or make like a lot of incredibly risky predictions with my electric types. So I mean, maybe the two basically one trick pony electric types is not the way to go. But I mean, it worked out. I'm in the finals, and then I think this matchup happens to be okay because of the electric thing. And then the other thing that stood out to me is he only has one defogger, which I know may seem kind of weird because I really haven't used hazards a lot this season, and feel free to chime in if I'm just talking out my butt here, Nate, because I know I have a tendency to miss things. But I believe Dragonite's his only defogger.
Right, as far as I'm aware, yeah.
Yeah, and then he has no rapid spinners. So, and, Dragonite isn't really something that you think of as being like, oh, I'm going to run Dragonite as my defogger. So I could see him either not bringing defog or, he's like, again, like I haven't really historically used a lot of hazards or, maybe taking a risky play to not run heavy duty boots on his Dragonite, and I want to make sure that I can kind of punish him for that, which is why you can kind of see the Stealth Rock on my Celebi. And the Celebi stuff is a little iffy. We can get into that later. But I definitely am going to bring at least one Mon with the Stealth Rock and try and get it up because I think the chip will be really helpful. Because I expect the match to be relatively quick, but involve a lot of switching around because his team I think is a little too thick for me to just Thunderbolt through it, but yeah. So hopefully from what I can tell,
his team is very thick, but more so in a way that it feels like rocks don't necessarily affect it as much. You see those three slow mons, the Ferrothorn, Blissey, and Clefable. Clefable obviously not taking anything from those rocks. Blissey is the classic Wisher / soft-boiled user, and Ferrothorn with its constant leech seeding and resistance to stealth rocks. It feels like a lot of his game too is getting up his own hazards. So we can see there are 4 Stealth Rock setters here as well as Ferrothorn being able to set up spikes. I guess your advantage in that sense is the amount of pressure that you do apply. Be able to threaten so many of his mons with so many of yours. And of course the switch pressure that you get from having a very free Volt Switch, which of course we'll get into in the second half of your team. So I guess to start, what are you expecting from him in this match? What is your objective going to be overall to bring down his big core, and which of his 7 mons are you expecting him to leave behind?
Yeah, so I think Steve's win con is mainly his mid-tier speed mons, which would be like Dragonite, Clefable, and Necrozma, because those are his setup sweepers. So if I lose the match, which I definitely think I can lose the match, I think it'll be to something like maybe a Dragon Dance Dragonite or an agility like Calm Mind or whatever other random setup move, Necrozma. And a lot of my strategy is around not letting his speed control outspeed my speed control, which I'm thinking he's probably I think he's definitely going to bring Scarf Baroscuda and probably going to bring Scarf Gengar. So if you look at my Regieleki speed, the Regieleki speed is enough to outspeed Scarf Gengar, but it does not outspeed Scarf Baroscuda. So I'm basically counting on Corviknight and Celebi as sort of hard stops to the Baroscuda. And then for Gengar, I kind of expect him to predict me to bring Scarf Regieleki, or at least I don't want, I don't want to assume that he's predicting I'm bringing Modest. But basically, I want to take care of his speed control Scarfers, and then just apply enough offensive pressure that his sort of mid-tier mons can't set up. Kind of a position I don't want to be in is I don't really want to have my Corviknight or Celebi out versus Dragonite or Necrozma, because I don't think they can do enough damage to stop them from setting up. Also, Dragonite's extreme speed is a really big threat to my team because a lot of the faster offensive mons are relatively frail. So I wouldn't be too surprised if he brought a banded Dragonite with E-speed. E-Speed doesn't really one-hit KO anything, but like with a little bit of chip damage on Regieleki or Weavile, it can, take them out pretty easily. So yeah. Like, and then the Celebi obviously has Thunder Wave. That's kind of like, if he has a setup mon out in front of me, I'm just going to T-Wave it. So... And then I'm really not that concerned versus the Blissey and the Ferrothorn. Obviously, Blissey is a really good special wall, but I think I can apply enough offensive pressure, and even like Thunderbolt and Rising Voltage in particular in Electric Terrain do a decent chunk to Blissey, and if Blissey comes in, I can just Volt Switch out into something that can KO it. And then Ferrothorn, Ferrothorn is definitely a threat. I'm kind of curious if he's going to bring like Fizz Def or Special or whatever. I'm a little bit predicting like a special defensive Ferrothorn, but I could be wrong about that because maybe he sees Ferrothorn as more my Weavile counter than anything. And one of the things that you may note about my team is that there's no setup mons, and that's because I think his team really does have enough offensive pressure to stop me from setting up. Like the best options I think I would have for setup mons would be maybe like a Weavile or a Corviknight. Like I could bring like bulk of Corviknight, but then you have to either drop U-turn or taunt, which I don't think is very good.
Right.
And then with Weavile, it's I don't really see a lot of setup opportunities with Weavile.
Sure.
In terms of what I don't expect him to bring, I'm not expecting him to bring one of his sort of mid-tier speed mons, which would be Dragonite, Necrozma, or Clefable. I think Blissey and Ferrothorn are... And Ferrothorn in particular is too good versus my team that he basically has to bring them. And then Baroscuda is also very good versus my team in the sense that it can outspeed everything with a Choice Scarf, and it also gets a random ground move, which is good coverage versus my team. Sure. I think it's called like Drill Run or something.
Yep, sure does.
And Gengar, I think Scarf Gengar is good. Even if he doesn't bring Scarf, it's still a threat versus my team. I have no Ghost Resist, I don't think. Sludge Wave is pretty good. Scarf outspeeds Bandit Weavile, which is a big threat, and Tapu Koko. And he may think it might outspeed Modest Regieleki, so I think he's definitely going to bring it. If I had to make a guess, I would say he's not going to bring Clefable.
Okay. Just
because I think Necrozma and Dragonite, they have setup options where they gain speed, and Clefable doesn't. And I think, even though his team's fairly fat, I don't see him setting up to a point where I can't break through any of his setup mons. Unless he obviously, if he takes out like a bunch of my Pokemon, then he could set up and win. But even if Clefable gets a bunch of Calm Minds up, I can still, hit it on the physical side with Weavile or a Nidoking, funnily enough, or even Corviknight. And yeah, I just and one of the reasons I'm thinking about Stealth Rock is I could see him bringing Unaware Clefable and try to counter some of my setup options. If I had to guess, I would say he would bring Magic Bounce, but even if he does bring it. And then Dragonite, I know we mentioned Stealth Rock before, but again, I could see him bringing Choice Band and not Heavy Duty Boots. I'm not saying he's not going to bring Heavy Duty Boots, but that's one of the reasons I want Stealth Rock. And again, with Blissey, I could see him maybe making a risky play to not bring Heavy Duty Boots because he's... he just wants extra leftovers recovery or whatever.
Right. I think the history shows that you're not one that's necessarily inclined to be bringing Stealth Rocks or prioritize those, especially in this matchup, I think, too. So that's an interesting thought process. Maybe catch him off guard with that.
Yeah. And, I mean, also, I think T-Wave is good versus his team. That's if you notice my my Celebi and Tapu Koko both have Thunder Wave. The Tapu Koko is kind of just a filler move. But on Celebi, he has no electric immunity. And if I can get a para off, the para is good for two reasons. On his faster mons, like Gengar and Baroscuda, it means they can't outspeed my stuff anymore if they get paralyzed, which is really nice. And then on the sort of mid-speed mons, it's good because it stops their speed boosting setup options, like Dragonite and Necrozma. And then really on anything, it's just even if I paralyze the Ferrothorn, okay, paralyze Ferrothorn, oh lol, you're just boosting a Gyro Ball, but there's still a 25% chance you don't do anything on your turn.
Absolutely.
Which is
and of course against Magikarp Clefable, that is the key condition that you want on it, especially if it's going to be starting to set up or anything.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I know Steve hasn't really brought the Necrozma all that much, but as you talk about it more, I definitely see the Clefable being maybe a little bit of liability for him. Among those lower speeds, you have a Nidoking, a Corviknight, a Nihilego, all of which can hit that thing super effectively despite its amazing typing, and otherwise just gets outsped by just about everything. So I could definitely see that not coming. Speaking of not coming, I see that Nihilego is your choice to leave on the bench. We've talked about this a little bit, but go into a little bit about why you decided that was not a mon to bring in the finals.
Yeah, so I think my two options to not bring were Nihilego and Clefable. Not Clefable, Celebi.
Mm-hmm.
It really just came down to the weaknesses of Nihilego. As I mentioned, Baroscuda gets a random ground coverage move. Also, water move is very strong versus Nihilego.
And yeah.
Yeah, and Nihilego's physical defense is just garbage, and Steve has a lot of physical mons, so I don't really see Nihilego tanking a lot. It's decent offensively. Like, Rock is relatively good offensively, like, obviously versus the Dragonite, and has good neutral coverage and stuff. But I really saw the defensive typing of Nihilego being a liability. I kind of wanted a bulkier Stealth Rock user, which Nihilego does learn Stealth Rock as well. Mm-hmm. But I like Celebi more as the pivot. I don't know. I mean, it's another special attacker. He has a Blissey. Nihilego, I don't think can really ever break through Blissey.
Mm-hmm. Or probably Ferrothorn either. It's very tough.
Yeah, it doesn't have any coverage moves versus Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn can just gyro ball it or set up hazards, and it doesn't even have a U-turn option to do a switch out.
Right.
So
probably the only advantage I can see is probably a little better against that Gengar. Probably tank hits pretty well, whereas Celebi's a little liable against that Gengar. But I think I definitely see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, Gengar is a threat versus my team. Like, I'm not trying to diminish it or anything, but I don't think it's like my quote unquote threat priority, if that makes sense. Like, I'm much more concerned about the mid-tier setup mons and being able to break, and by mid-tier I mean mid-speed tier, and being able to break through the slower mons. Like, I don't really see myself having a huge problem versus Baroscuda and Gengar. Famous last words. I think the main problem they have is when they're on Steve's team, I have to play more conservatively, just because if they come in, they can outspeed my stuff. So
right. Maybe you have to scout for Scarfs, things like that. Yeah.
And one of the reasons I'm thinking he's going to bring a couple of Choice Scarfers is that's sort of how he played against me in the regular season. Obviously, his defensive team was Dragon, and I know it's not really up here, but it basically just had a bunch of really fast Dragon Pokemon that were strong. And he brought, I think, like 2 or 3 Choice Scarfers versus me. So I definitely think he's going to try and have some sort of speed control versus me.
Interesting. If it worked one time, I don't think he was able to successfully defend against you. But if I remember right, that was a very close match.
It was by far my hardest offensive match, and I think that could have very easily gone either way.
Sure. So if he has a similar mindset, maybe something to look out for. Let's finally actually get into your team. Then I think we can split this up pretty easily into 3 little cores of 2. I want to start off with the electric core, of course, the most obvious of those. The Tapu Koko is Choice Specs, has multiple electric moves or coverage T-Bolt for just staying in. Volt Switch, as you've touched on, amazing momentum because he doesn't have an immunity. You already kind of touched the Thunder Wave too. A little of an odd choice with Choice Specs, but as you said, no real reason to run anything but that electric coverage. Not like it's going to get anything anywhere against the Ferrothorn anyways. And then the Emergency Defog option as well for those 4 rockers. And then Eleki also electing to run Choice Specs. We already touched on why you're timid. That's for the Scarf Gengar there. And otherwise, Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Rising Voltage, very funny option, but something you can actually afford to run with Koko, and another emergency remover in Rapid Spin. Can you tell me about the role that you see these 2 playing, these 2 Choice Specs electric mons?
Yeah, no, I mean, these are just for basically offensive pressure and then emergency defog. I'll just do the Tapu Koko first. So really the only option I saw besides Thunderwave for the 3rd move slot, and it would be Moon. I think it's called Moonblast, or it's Dazzling Gleam.
Right.
It's whatever the 80 base power one is, which is kind of garbage because it's only 80 base power. But that's really only the only Pokemon that even gets a little bit of a damage boost versus is Dragonite. And I mean the Thunder moves are still very good versus him. So I didn't really see the point in giving up a move slot versus that. I don't really see a situation where I would ever Moonblast the Dragonite just because, he could predict it and go to a Ferrothorn or something. And it's just, the damage differential is not enough to justify a prediction risk in my opinion. Sure. I mean, maybe it'll be maybe I'll lose the match because I need an extra 5% damage on Dragonite or something, and that'd be pretty funny. But
you can't prepare for absolutely everything, right?
Yeah. And then defog, as you mentioned, is just an emergency defog option. Another option I'm considering for Tapu Koko would be Choice Scarf. I may switch this before the match. I'm considering adding a Choice Scarf to either Tapu Koko or Weavile. The main thing with that would be one, outspeeding Scarf Gengar, which is nice, and two, it actually outspeeds +2 Timid, or +2 speed boosting rather, Necrozma and Dragonite, which I could see Dragonite being Dragon Dance. Honestly, I'm like doing a soft prediction for a choice ban on the Dragonite, but I could definitely see Dragonite or Dragon Dance too. And then it outspeeds a +2 agility, or I don't know what it does for +2. It's like Automize or something. I don't remember.
You're right.
For Necrozma.
Right?
And yeah, so but the specs is really strong. So it's kind of nice.
It's such a fun item to just be able to click buttons with, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think Thunderbolt does like 30% to Blissey, and Volt Switch will do like 25. So I mean, Blissey can still tank, but it's not like Blissey can switch in for free. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially when you're applying that pressure with Volt Switch.
Yeah. And then Regieleki is a total one-trick pony, but it doesn't matter because it's so good. It's one thing that you can't really do anything about it.
Especially, as we said, no immunity, and that's
no immunity. Yeah. So I mean, really, like, there's like 3 viable options for Regieleki set. There's Choice Specs, Choice Scarf, and like dual screens. So for me, there's no way I'm bringing dual screens, right? Electric is just too good offensively versus his team. I could maybe use it as like a meme because he won't be predicting it to like let Weavile set up or something. But I don't. I think I have a decent enough matchup that I don't have to try and do like a meme strategy to try and beat him. So yeah. So the Scarf, the only real option, or the only real advantage of Scarf would be that it would outspeed Scarf Baroscuda and +2
Necrozma Dragonite.
Necrozma Dragonite. One thing that's interesting about this speed tier is it actually does outspeed +2 neutral natured Necrozma Dragonite. But I don't know. I expect Steve will notice that and make them jolly or timid if he is going for like a speed boosting setup option. But if he doesn't notice that, good for me. I can still outspeed them +2.
Right. And even then, if he is running that means not necessarily as much damage output. Maybe something can live a hit on that. So yeah, definitely good to creep that even just that little bit. Yeah, and
the timid nature, it doesn't really miss out on too many KOs. I think the main thing is like I think Volt Switch does like 99 min versus Gengar with timid or something now, which is like a little annoying, but like whatever. And I think Ferrothorn is a bit more of a risk. Not that you would think of Regieleki as a classic Ferrothorn counter, but Rising Voltage does still 2-shot it, but it's a much I don't even know if it 2-shots it if it's timid, but it still does like around 50. And one of the funny things is that Specs Rising Voltage actually does 2-shot Blissey, which is hilarious, and I hope that. And to be clear, I mean in electric terrain.
Right. Not... Well, I would assume so.
Yeah.
Outside, it's a little rough. So if these are the 2 special attackers, I do want to be able to move on to the 2 physical attackers on your team, which are the Weavile. Makes a lot of sense for Weavile. I think this mod is incredible in the matchup overall. Triple Axle, Knockoff, Ice Shard, and Brick Break as the coverage. Awesome coverage options there too. And the other physical option, a little bit surprising, but I really like the Nidoking set here. Poison Jab, Superpower. Superpower, of course, big fighting coverage over the ground coverage that you traditionally see on Nidoking, as well as the elemental punches, Ice and Fire. I think these are awesome compliments to these special attackers. Go into a little bit about how you decided on these sets and banned on Weavile, I think in particular, is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so for the Nidoking, the superpower is pretty obviously for Blissey. It still does damage versus Ferrothorn, but mainly it's there for Blissey.
It's a nice lure.
I'm actually still a little debating the physical versus special for Nidoking because I would either keep superpower or, funnily enough, Nidoking learns Focus Punch for Blissey. But with a special Nidoking, it's kind of more of a surprise, right? Like, if he sees me use Poison Jab on Nidoking, it's fairly easy to predict that he has superpower as well. At least I would assume Steve would predict that. Maybe he's a little less likely to predict it if he sees Sludge Wave. I'm kind of expecting Steve to lean heavily on specially defensive. And Nidoking's attack stat is actually higher than his special attack stat.
Right,
so even though these
moves, we see here,
yeah. So even though these moves on Nidoking are like a little weaker in base power, besides the superpower, of course, which superpower doesn't get sheer force boost, which is another thing to call out. They aren't quite as weaker as you might imagine at first glance, just because they're of his higher attack stat. I am, like I said, I am kind of predicting a special Ferrothorn. Maybe he'll bring Fizz Def, but if he brings special, the physical Nidoking's better. The reason I dropped the earth or the ground coverage is it's really only, I mean, it's decent neutral coverage, right? But whenever you use a ground move, you gotta risk the flying type coming in, which in his case would be Dragonite. And it's really only good versus Gengar. And I don't really see my Nidoking as a Gengar counter. Like, if Gengar comes out, I might stay in and still attack it, but like I'm not gonna like switch my Nidoking in on a Gengar. And then the other coverage moves are very good. Superpowers for Blissey. Poison Jab is neutral and good for Clefable. I know I said I don't think he's gonna bring Clefable, but if he does bring it, I want to make sure it can't Calm Mind in my face and win. So, and then Ice Punch for Dragonite. And then Fire Punch, for Ferrothorn.
Awesome coverage.
Yeah. And then getting into the Weavile, I know we actually had a discussion a little earlier where you recommended the Swords Dance, and I sort of mentioned this earlier. Is like, I think all the coverage moves are great, and I don't think I'll have a lot of options to set up.
Sure.
And that's really what it boils down to. This is maybe a playstyle thing, and maybe this is me, playing suboptimally. But I really hate having to set up on a predicted switch because, like, all of his Pokemon can do enough damage to my Weavile to make it very painful to stay in. So,
right.
like, if I get that
easy. I think I agree with that. At first glance, you could think, oh, Blissey, what's it doing to you? Thunder Wave is something you cannot afford to switch in on, right? And if you're getting low enough, you got chipped by rocks or something, and then a Seismic Toss comes in. Yeah, I could definitely see why there wouldn't be enough opportunities to set up, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the damage from Choice Band is still pretty good, and I think the coverage options are good enough that, like, being Choice Locked isn't really the end of the world. Like, I think I could still, for instance, pull off a late game sweep with Triple Axle, assuming I don't miss, which I probably will miss, but...
always the risk you take.
There's always the risk, I mean, it's really, Triple Axle is a pretty risky move. Like, it's only a bit over 70% that all three hit, So, but yeah, and then the only really interesting thing about his head is Brick Break over Low Kick. So Low Kick is slightly stronger versus Ferrothorn, but it's a lot weaker versus Blissey. And I mean, I could use other moves versus Blissey. I don't know, but I just figured Brick Break was a good neutral option. It's still 2 shots Ferrothorn. So and like Low Kick doesn't pick up an Oko or anything.
Right,
versus Ferrothorn.
I definitely want to go back to the Nidoking just a little bit because having the physical Nidoking with physical Weavile, as you said, being able to determine what kind of Ferrothorn it is, I think is super important in the matchup, right? And having your 2 electric mons makes you think that maybe it'll end up leaning on the especially defensive side, and that could definitely open up those holes for Nidoking and Weavile to break through. So definitely like the mind games are playing around with that quite a bit.
Yeah, no, and I mean, one other thing is if I drop the Stealth Rock on Celebi, I'll definitely put Stealth Rock on Nidoking, but I see Celebi as a more reliable Stealth Rocker, because if I have Nidoking out, I'm definitely going to want to click an offensive move, and that's not really the case with Celebi.
And speaking of the last duo of your team are the 2 defensive mons. Corviknight, relatively straightforward, but you can go in a little bit more detail about the use for each of these moves. The U-Turn, Iron Head, Taunt, and Roost. U-Turn, I know, was kind of an MVP in your semifinals match against John. Someone, of course, who notoriously complains about the pivoting moves. You've suddenly kind of come around on these, I think. And the other one is Rocky Helmet Celebi, which I'll definitely be curious to hear about. With Stealth Rock, U-Turn, Thunder Wave, and Recover, definitely hard pivoting mon without much offensive potential at all. So go into your defensive backbone here, both of which seem to have physical defensive investment in particular.
Yeah, so I'll go into Corviknight first. I think it's the more straightforward set. There's Fizz Def versus especially defensive. I did Fizz Def. I think Fizz Def Corviknight is pretty clearly good. It's a hard stop for Baroscuda, which I think is something I need to be worried about with my team. Dragonite's a good physical attacker. Necrozma's a special attacker, but I don't know, maybe he'll run physical, which I kind of doubt it, but you never know. It's never going to be a counter for Gengar, because I bet he's going to bring Thunderbolt on Gengar. And versus Ferrothorn, I mean, honestly, if his Ferrothorn comes out, I'm just going to taunt it and PP stall it. Like, Like I know my coverage moves aren't really good versus Ferrothorn, but I could still taunt it, and I have pressure, and he's gonna run out of moves eventually. So, and so don't be surprised if you see a couple hundred turn match where I PT stall as Ferrothorn.
Just keep the video going. Hey, we're going long enough already. I think that's fine. We can watch 200 turns. That'd be entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it'll take that long, but and then the 12 speed EVs, I was actually a bit on the fence about Impish versus like a speed minus nature, but the 12 speed EVs are just if in case he tries and speed creeps it with Clefable, maybe I'll speed creep him by 1 or something. You never know.
Right. That's another reason, of course, for that Iron Head on there. Get some nice tip on the Clefable, I assume. Yeah,
and I also I didn't want to bring. So Body Press has horrible coverage versus his team. Mm-hmm. Like it's just not good. And then there's Brave Bird. So I could see definitely people thinking that Brave Bird is a better coverage option, but do I really want to be taking 33% recoil from damage to Blissey? No, I don't. So
some HP tanks on his team for sure.
Yeah. I don't really like recoil moves too much to begin with, and if you have a Blissey on your team, that's just one more reason
for trouble.
Yeah, and then obviously Corviknight's a defog or an optional defogger. I think Taunt is better. I was a little bit maybe soft. I should bring defog, but I think Taunt is again, like I said, I'm not expecting him to bring Clefable, but Taunt is still good. And if Corviknight's in versus one of his setup mons, I could Taunt it after it sets up, after it sets up 1 turn, you turn out, and blah 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And then the Clefable set is, Celebi. I know I keep saying Clefable. The Celebi set is by far my memeiest set, I would say. Sure. So like I said, I wanted a Stealth Rocker. So Celebi learns Stealth Rock. U-turn's there for pivoting. Recovers, just recover. It's there for bulk. And Thunder Wave, he has no electric immunities. And as I mentioned before, I think Thunder Wave is a very, very useful status move versus his team. Obviously, the missing move here is any offensive move. But I didn't really like Celebi's offensive coverage versus his team. I felt that Celebi and Nihilego were clearly the worst mons for me with this matchup. Mm-hmm. So I'm not expecting Celebi to be an MVP or anything. And I didn't see the point in running an offensive move. If it comes between getting 30% damage or Thunder Waving something, I'm going to Thunder Wave 100%. The only mons that I could really do damage to would be Baroscuda and Gengar. And Gengar outspeeds me. And I thought I'd bring a Resist Berry, but Gengar gets both Shadow Ball and Sludge Wave. Hmm. So, which super effective coverage move is he going to pick versus me? I don't know. And then I really don't think Baroscuda is going to stay in on my Celebi. Even if he knows my full moveset and realizes that I can't really hurt him, I can still Thunder Wave him and I can recover stall and make sure he dies to Rocky Helmet Chip, worst case scenario. So
double Rocky Helmet, very interesting. You have definitely touched on how Gengar, Clefable, maybe to cross I suppose, are kind of the special offensive threats, but if you don't think maybe the Clefable's going to come, definitely leaning a lot more physical. So double Rocky Helmet, very cool for that recoil chip damage.
Yeah, and then just to note, Celebi's sped to outspeed his base 80s at max speed, which is why you see it's Jolly. Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought about doing maybe especially defensive Celebi, but I just I'm not going to say Celebi's a Dragonite counter, but if I T-Wave him and he does dual Wing Beat and takes 2 Rocky Helmet hits, I'm pretty happy with the work that my Celebi put in versus Dragonite. Right. So
if you're that concerned about the setup sweepers, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. So, any other thoughts before we head over to Steve's interview here?
Yeah, I mean, not really. It's just like I said, I think I have an okay matchup. We'll see how it goes. If I win, then I win. It's great. If I lose, then it's really funny. We all have lost 5 finals appearances. So
you Buffalo Bills League.
Yeah, there's really it's really a win-win no matter how I do in the finals. But I definitely am trying to win. So
yeah, that's right. Congrats on making it yet again. 5 out of 7 times he's made the finals. Still looking for his first W. I'm responsible for 3 of those. Steve responsible for the first one. So let's see how you do on the rematch here. Thanks for the interview and everything. It's very cool to see the thoughts of the coaches before the battle. But now it's time to head over to Steve's interview and see what he's cooking up for you. All right, as promised, we've got the interview with SteveChuck right before the match. How are you feeling about this?
A little nervous, but ready to go.
I think that's totally understandable. A rematch with Chad, as we talked about earlier, a Season 1 rematch, and in Monotype once again, very fittingly. So how did you think the season went? You were one of our admins kind of in the background, making sure everything was working, making sure that this experimentation we had with the gym leader season went smoothly. How did you feel this all went?
I think the format itself worked fairly well. It kind of went as we expected, with the making it to the playoffs being heavily based on just winning majority, if not all, of your offensive matches. Mm-hmm. And I think the playoffs really shook things up, because some of the teams that were really doing well kind of dropped off in the playoffs just because the dramatic change in format, having to prepare for 7 mons that can change as opposed to 11 mons that are all fairly fixed is a pretty big difference, and adds a little bit of the challenge to the drafting process.
Absolutely. It's interesting to see some of the teams that did very well were very polar, too. I mentioned this with Chad. I want to know your thoughts about it. Quickly, Chad's team is very fast, and your team is very much slower and thick. Very different approaches to beating the gym teams, and then also found success against some of the better teams in the playoffs as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that when I was drafting this team, that was what I was looking for. Was definitely kind of I was assuming that with a mon with a couple good mons with good coverage, Dragonite especially, the Necrozma was really good, Gengar. Those would allow me to. They'd each have their moments to shine and get through the gym leaders fairly easily, and then a kind of bulkier approach would pull me through the postseason.
It seems to have done quite a good job about that. How did you feel about that team? It obviously performed well in that you got all 8 gym badges, and then also two wins here to make it to the finals. How did you feel about the overall performance? Did everything kind of turn out as you expected? Some months that performed a little bit better or worse than you expected?
It's gone great. Clefable, as always, is excellent. Even though it's the first draft pick, it definitely lived up to that. I think Blissey might have been a little bit of a letdown. Every week when prepping with it, Blissey, has a somewhat decent special move pool with not a ton of special attack, but enough that you could consider doing it. But every week I looked at it, it really didn't do enough, and Blissey always seemed to have to go into more of a defensive role, which, to be fair, is always excellent to have something.
I think it's pretty good at that, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good at that. I was hoping to get a little more versatility out of it, but it still was a great special wall. Ferrothorn has been excellent. Body press is amazing. Iron Barbs is great. Can really do a lot there. Necrozma, I think, was probably undervalued by everyone. Mm-hmm. It's diverse move pool, its options to set up physically, specially, boost its defense.
I think definitely agree. That thing, in many other draft leagues I've seen, this is a tier 1 mon that can go quickly, and for us, nobody's really used it all that well. I noticed even you haven't brought it all that often. It seems to be something you've left behind quite often, but I'm definitely glad to see we're starting to see the value of this thing, just the myriad of options it has, yeah.
Right. But yeah, that's what we got.
Right, and then how do you feel about your opponent's team? Very different from yours, but very similar success.
So his team is very much Chad's play style of hyper offense. Mm-hmm. With his first 2 picks with Tapu Koko and Regieleki, we all kind of saw what was happening, and he had some great later round steals to kind of fill that out. The key, I guess, against the hyper offense is trying to weather it as best you can. So we'll see if I'm able to. But his team has worked great, and it does one thing very well, and that's enough. And he has enough kind of versatile options in his lower picks that even against tough matchups, the immunity to electric from any ground mons, he's got Weavile to cover that. As well as some great additional attackers in the Helgo and the Nidoking. really versatile team and is difficult to prepare for.
It's tough to say versatile whenever you see a Regieleki and Tapu Koko on there, but I think he's done a good job with that for sure. So then, coming up against you, what are you expecting from this? The elephant in the room is that you don't have an electric community on your team. That's the absolute straightforward portion of his team. What are you expecting from him? Which mon are you not expecting to come, and what do you think is his overall game plan for the finals?
As for what I'm not expecting, considering it's only 7 mons, I really don't think too much about what they're not going to bring. It's not that much effort to prepare for a 7th mon. Mm-hmm. If anything, knowing his playstyle and seeing what I have, maybe Celebi. Although Celebi, I think, is the mon I am most worried about and interferes with my game plan the most.
That seems like Celebi. Whenever it's in your hands, I drafted Celebi just a couple seasons ago in our league. It was always an intriguing mon to bring, but I also felt super worried about it, so I didn't end up bringing it. But then talking with opponents, they were scared about it. Very weird mon, for sure.
Yeah. So, Chad's kind of boasted a little bit, and I do expect him to lean heavily on his electric attackers, specifically Volt Switches a lot. He's very happy that I don't have any immunities to Volt Switch, and Tapu Koko and Regieleki can just come and go as they please. Mm-hmm. He's also asked me to look at the calcs of Regieleki Choice Specs Rising Voltage. And I must say those calcs are not necessarily appealing to me in the electric terrain.
I understand. Even that Blissey, which doesn't have special defense investment, probably not going to be happy about that.
Takes a significant chunk. Clefable just dies. Necrozma dies. Baroscuda takes 800 to 950%.
Interesting. Okay. Well, okay.
But Blissey, both Blissey and Ferrothorn can take a hit, but that's it. They can take a hit. Mm-hmm. So you can't switch it in and have it sit there for 2 turns to force it out. I also don't think either of them have really, Blissey especially doesn't have great options to force out Regieleki. Mm-hmm. The usual thing would be Thunderwave, but that's obviously not going to work here. So it's gonna be more about if Regieleki sets up like that revenge killing.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that means we can kind of start going in a little bit into your team. First up, I have to say, when I was talking with Chad, I think we both agreed Gengar looked like a very big threat. No Gengar present here. I know that kind of conflicts a little bit with the game plan you've assembled here, but talk to me a little bit about how you decided to leave behind the big special attacking Gengar.
So we were, I was looking at Gengar and its attacking here. Sludge Wave is admittedly quite useful here. Picks up damage on the Tapu Koko. Chance to one-hit the Regieleki, pick damage on Celebi. But he also has pretty easy switch-ins to it in Corviknight, Nihilego, and Nidoking. Also, Nihilego just completely walls almost anything Gengar can do. Even switching to a super effective Psychic attack is not going to really break through the big special defense there. I was bringing him up until last night, but when reviewing it, the other mod I was leaving on was Clefable. And between the two of them, it seemed Clefable went more to the win condition I was going for, and Gengar just kind of seemed like a separate attacker that you could clean up in the right situation, but just its speed in this matchup also isn't great, getting outsped by Koko, Lucky, and Weavile. Just has, in my opinion, too many things it has to worry about, and not enough damage output.
I think that's fair then, yeah. We can go into the team a little bit and see how everything came together to that conclusion. We can kind of separate this into, I think, probably 2 little subsets here, kind of a defensive core and an offensive core. So I want to talk about the defensive one first, because they're more so setting up. Starting with the Ferrothorn, looks more like a lead mon kind of thing, and not necessarily full setup like the other 2 are. But this is your Stealth Rock user. We've got Iron Barbs on there too with Endure. I know you've been favoring that quite a bit. Knockoff, very painful. That's also going to be a trend here. Talk to me about the Ferrothorn set a little bit.
Yeah, the Ferrothorn is probably not actually the lead, and I'll talk about that when we get to Necrozma specifically. But the goal of Ferrothorn really here is just to disrupt his set, put up rocks to prevent any, especially Focus Sashes that I when prepping focus sashes are just the bane of everyone. But they're also so hard to use because of hazards. But just be annoying in the mid or early game. Remove items, endure a hit, and then with the Custop Berry, bring something down to 1 HP to make an easy revenge kill for Dragonite, or if he switches it out and switches it back in, a Rock Slayer dies. So just kind of be annoying, remove items, get up rocks, and then hopefully take something down with it.
Okay, Custop Endeavor, super interesting set. Like you said, that Dragonite with extreme speed, that's a pretty natural pairing. The other two, this definitely has to be, I think, the focus of what we're talking about. The Blissey with Damp Rock and Rain Dance Teleport, along with Clefable with Teleport Rain Dance. That's a pretty clear strategy that I'm seeing here. Get the rain up and get out for these two, especially without any way to heal themselves. Obviously, when you think of Blissey, you think of Wish passing or wishing itself up or soft-boiled on itself. And with Clefable, you think something similar. Maybe even a setup option for itself with Calm Mind. Neither of these two have that option available to them in their arsenal this time around. Talk to me about that. Another knockoff on Clefable, too, and Healing Wish. Very interesting sets.
Yeah, I mean, you notice the main thing here. It's Rain Dance, and teleport into someone to abuse it. And that's very apparent when we'll look at the offensive core in a second here. But they're both built around supporting the offensive core. Against Chad's hyper offense, I don't really expect a chance for Clefable to get to set up. It doesn't really like his defensive mod of Corviknight, just because of the type matchup. And outside of that, he's not going to give Clefable the chance to set up. It makes a pretty decent Weavile switch in, unless he brings like Iron Tail, I think it gets. But in general, it's here just to set Rain. Healing Wish can give Dragonite or Baroscuda a second life at the end of the game. And then again, I like to at least have one offensive move on every Mon, just so that they're not, taunt bait, or if it's my last Mon, there's still a chance. Knockoff provides some disruption more disruption to items. Don't want, surprise choice scarfs coming to bite me in the butt at the end of the game, or the extra power he gets from Life Orb or Specs or anything like that. And just trying to disrupt his game plan. And then Clefable Protect to try and stall out some electric terrain given the chance. And Seismic Toss, again, the consistent damage that sometimes Blissey can just pick up a KO if needed.
Yeah, that Protect running out electric terrain, that's a super interesting idea there too, especially if you can get Coco out of the way. Electric terrain starting to wear down, you can survive a hit on Aleki, you can still kind of run that out and have another way to disrupt one of his big threats there. A couple more things I want to touch on. Unaware is the ability on Clefable here over Magikarp that we normally see, as well as the Kabaya Berry. I believe that's the Poison Resist Berry. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so given Chad's hyper offense, Magikarp's the default, but I was thinking about it, and I don't see a significant chance of a Toxic coming out. Even then, Clefable's not so much meant as a wall, but a support setup here. So Magikarp didn't really seem to add much for Clefable. Unaware gives it a use in that if he's, sets up something that is looking scary, Blissey can switch in and still do something, whether it be knock off the item, Healing Wish to get someone in, Rain Dance. The Unaware just means I don't have to worry about whatever setup sweeping he is trying to do. And then, of course, the Berry to absorb poison attacks, Nidoking and Nihilego. They're both very threatening, and this allows... It does not allow to survive 2 hits from them, assuming they're especially offensive. But it does allow it to survive something from that, plus additional chip damage. Just gives me the potential for one more turn to set up the rain, use Healing Wish.
Awesome. Yeah, one more thing I want to bring up about the defensive mons. We see it on the Necrozma 2, actually, is a lot of investment in special defense on the Clefable and the Ferrothorn. It feels like you could kind of go either way, but it seems you chose to go almost all in on special defense. What led you to that decision?
Have you looked at his team? So Regieleki, it does have some physical moves, but I am most scared of the special electric moves, the Rising Voltage and Volt Switch, of course. He could bring something like Explosion or Extreme Speed, Rapid Spin, but then again, those aren't the type of moves I'm very concerned with. It's the special move pool from that. Tapu Koko again has bigger physical attack, but it's the special electric moves that I think are more common. I'm kind of also reading into this. Chad mentioning about the Volt switch opportunities for free. That'll kind of direct him more towards special anyways for both of those. Nihilego, of course, special there. Nidoking could bring physical moves. That is possible. But Nidoking is much more known for, the Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Earth Power, Sludge Wave, all of them getting benefited by sheer force. So that's what I'm expecting, and if it's physical, that might just be better anyways for me. And then Celebi, I don't want to think about what Celebi's going to do.
I think that's totally fine. Celebi, one of the most unpredictable ones in the game. Speaking of that special defense, though, I want to talk about I think this is probably my favorite set that I've seen here. This Necrozma holding Electric Seed on there, taking advantage of what you're very much assuming to be a Tapu Koko coming with Electric Terrain, Calm Mind, Moonlight, and the two coverage moves of Heat Wave and Earth Power. Please dissect this one a little bit for me. This is so interesting.
So something I found in previous seasons with Aegislash going up against, I think it was Rillaboom, is if they have a favored terrain and their way through you is a knockoff. Otherwise, you resist most of their moves. A berry or something that gives you a stat boost, and that's chase the Grassy Seed, in this case the Electric Seed, really makes that matchup a lot better. The only with all the special defense investment on the physical side, what I'm kind of scared of is Weavile. But by having the Electric Seed, I get the defense boost as well as his knockoff is less powerful, making his easy answer here not so good. Calm Mind allows me to get that special defense even higher, assuming again a mostly special set from most of his mons. Full specially defensive and HP, just because that's the goal is kind of longevity before damage here. And that's mainly because Heat Wave and Earth Power have perfect, super effective coverage against this entire team. With all the electric types and poison types, Earth Power hits them all very well. Even then, it also hits Weavile quite well too, because Weavile is not by any means bulky. And then Heat Wave, of course, picking up super effective on the Corviknight, Celebi, and Weavile. The only slight issue here is with the Rain Dance. Heat Wave's power is diminished. So the idea is Necrozma lead, does what he can, and starts punching holes to clean up for a later sweeper.
Yeah, super interesting. Moonlight probably a little negative with the Rain Dance too, but so long as you're able to sort between those two, I want to see this set put in some work. This is so interesting, seeing the Electric Seed. And again, interesting Weavile answer in weakening the knockoff in multiple different ways, Prism Armor, not having an item, etc. So very cool, very interesting there. And we can finish up then with, as we kind of danced around this whole time, the Rain Core here. Baroscuda is the first one, Liquidation and Flip Turn, Water typing in the rain with a Choice Band, and Aqua Jet there too. My goodness, 3 water coverage moves there. In the rain, that seems like that's going to hit super hard, plus the synergy with Swift Swim. It seems like you figured out at least one answer here to the giant speed problem that Chad presents. The other one is Dragonite. Thunder and Hurricane, Stab Hurricane in the rain, plus Extreme Speed as another option for the speed control, as well as Earthquake. Great coverage across the entire team with some heavy-duty boots to back all that up. Talk to me about how you arrived at these two being the biggest answers, from what I can tell, to solving Chad's team.
So the Chad's team wins through speed control and not through bulk. So if you can outspeed it and hit it hard enough, it collapses. Enter Baroscuda. Liquidation, Choice Band in the rain, one-shots, Koko, Lecky, Weavile, Nihilego, and Nidoking.
That's a lot.
That's it. That leaves Corviknight and Celebi. Corviknight can't switch in on Liquidation. It gets, depending on investment, I honestly don't remember. Oh, I am looking at full physical. Okay. It might survive with leftovers and minerals, but otherwise it gets hit by Liquidation. Celebi, of course, being the only real switch in, and the coverage move of choice is therefore Crunch if the situation presents itself a crunch on Celebi can certainly ruin that. The whole game plan is really whittle down his team to the point that Baroscuda just comes in with enough rain and hits liquidation to win. There is a chance that he can outspeed this, of course. Regieleki, with a plus speed nature and a choice scarf, does outspeed it. That also means if he's a plus speed and has rapid spin for a speed boost or runs agility, he can certainly outspeed it. But I think he's gonna prefer the choice specs and sheer power.
I know we're all scared of the choice scarf agility set, but
exactly. And on the other side, I have not used Swiss Swim once this season. It's very possible he'll think of it and plan for it, but I think this has a little bit of surprise factor considering we really haven't seen that at all this season.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the only time being when you were facing against my water gym.
Right, and even then it came up, but I'm pretty sure I just died instantly, so not too much.
And this Dragonite, mixed Dragonite, super interesting.
Yeah, so the Dragonite here to support extreme speed, to pick up KOs against his much faster team. Earthquake, again, ground is fantastic coverage against Chad. Earthquake doing significant damage and chance to one-hit KO at least. The Coco, Lecky, Nihilgo, and Nidoking. Hurricane for Celebi. Celebi's not going to like to take that. And Thunder for Corviknight. Of course, both of the special moves boosted by rain, but of course I can still try and hit them outside of rain for fun. Fully offensive, just trying to, again, punch holes before Baroscuda comes in and tries to sweep. If his team is very much not built on regenerating itself, the damage will stick to almost everything I do damage to. So if I can just get a couple holes punched in, get rain up for Baroscuda, that's game.
Yeah, that's super interesting to bring up, in particular Thunder and Hurricane hitting Corviknight and Celebi, the only two mons that you had mentioned, Baroscuda would not be able to break through immediately. So a lot of synergy in both of the two attackers here. No speed investment, again, probably not needed, because if you can't outspeed his giant fast mons anyways, no point investing in that speed. So a lot of attack and special attack. With a lonely nature, once again, showing that you're more concerned about the special offense rather than the physical. I'm excited to see how this all comes together. You have any other thoughts before we go into the battle?
Definitely excited for the battle. Chad does have a history of losing the championship. He has definitely joked that I have a sure win here, but at the same time, after saying that, he will say he feels quite good about the matchup. And I'll admit, I did not feel good about the matchup, but after some time in the team building, if he's not ready for the swim Baroscuda, I think I have a pretty good chance.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see how both of these teams square up. It'll be cool to be able to do a commentary knowing what both teams are trying to do ahead of time. We'll be able to kind of take our time, dissect each and every move. And so let's just head on right into the battle. Moving to the finals, we see both teams incorrect about the mon that the other would leave behind. Chad leaving Nihilego instead of Celebi, and the much more surprising decision of Steve leaving behind Gengar instead of Clefable. Hearing Steve's reasoning, I think I very much agree with it, and I also agree with Chad's reasoning of leaving Nihilego behind and it being such a liability against so much of Steve's team. We know Steve's plan is to lead off with Necrozma and start shredding, so what is Chad's response? Let's go, and Necrozma will face off against Celebi on turn 1. This plays well into Chad's plan of getting paralysis off on Steve's big threats, and that does include Necrozma. T-Wave does land turn 1 into the calm minding tactics of Necrozma. Don't know if Steve could have anticipated that T-Wave. If so, I suppose something like Blissey could have been the swap. Maybe U-Turn or Leech Seed were bigger threats, so I think it's fine that Steve stayed in, even though the Electric Seed is currently rotting away on Necrozma. Now what? As Steve pointed out, Necrozma does have super effective coverage on literally Chad's entire team, so a swap out may not actually help all that much. But he also needs to keep Celebi healthy for Baroscuda. And at this point, Steve doesn't have a reason to swap out. May as well get up some rocks. I suppose it's a good choice by Chad. And Steve just fires off Heat Wave for a solid 70%. Now is definitely a precarious situation for Chad. His whole team does outspeed Necro, but it's not like he's going to be doing too much damage to Necro with anything in particular, especially not with this Celebi, not with this set. U-turn does still seem right, as he cannot risk Necro breaking through paralysis twice in a row to KO it through recovers and waste away doing nothing. But now what do you go into? +1 Heat Wave has no resist with Nihilego on the bench. What do you use to break this down that can also take a hit? You don't have to predict Heat Wave. That's pretty easy. That's coming this turn. So no Corviknight, no Weavile switch in. The electric types don't actually OHKO, and all they can do is fail. So they have that and just Volt Switch out so something else takes another hit. Nidoking is important for its coverage and destroying all of Steve's defensive ons, but there really isn't a good choice here, I guess. So I guess that's going to be it. No good choices unless you can get that full para. That's the price of a T-Wave, I guess. We'll come back to the impact of this later. For now, it's time to see how well you can trade hits. Max attack Jolly against max HP Necrozma. 50% is an average roll. That's not bad. Way more interesting is this hit into Nidoking from Necrozma, which that is an absolute min roll. That, according to what I got from the EVs ahead of time, is an 81.3% chance to one-hit KO, and Nidoking still has a whole 3% left, too. Yeah, lots of poor luck for Steve, who should have gotten a KO from either a Heat Wave instead of a Para, or a reasonable roll here. Everything after this is just extra credit for Chad, though do consider that Coco or Lecky could easily revenge KO the Necrozma here as well, no matter what he ends up doing. So the issue is, from this range, Regieleki only KOs with Volt Switch with a little less than half the time, and Coco never does. They'd have to stay in T-Bolt. Of course, Chad could also just go into Corv, pick up the KO, or maybe Steve would just pivot to Blissey. Or that's not the world we live in. We live in one in which Nidoking lived, and on this turn, KO'd the Necrozma 6-5 to Chad, with Dragonite coming in to outspeed the King with extreme speed in particular. Honestly, Steve doesn't have too many options at this point, considering Nidoking outspeeds just about everything. But Steve wants this Dragonite to start rampaging with its excellent coverage choices, so extreme speed will in fact be the choice into Rocky Helmet Corviknight. Nice play from Chad here to ensure he could break the multi-scale and keep the Nidoking around for later potential sack, or even get it in on something potentially. So that's pretty nice. This is a cool turn here though too, as going the other way. Dragonite lands its Thunder onto Corviknight, bringing it down to just 26%. And as we went over in the pregame, Baroscuda can now OHKO everything that's here, thanks to the immense chip onto its only 2 checks of Corviknight and Celebi. That's actually huge! And Chad needs to figure a way out around that. For now, it'll be to try and claim a KO or get better positioning with the U-turn, and he's going to choose to go into Regieleki. U-turn made sense, as he thought that this would be a fully physical Dragonite, but it obviously didn't work out. Great prep there by Steve, putting in the special coverage, especially of Thunder, as a way to break past the Corviknight. That's pretty excellent prep. Lecky is nice for how strong the spec set is, of course. Once again, the T-Bolt can KO, but Volt Switch won't. So what's the play? You've got a T-Bolt, right? But Blissey can set up the Baroscuda if it's let in for free. So what does Steve do? He actually just lets the Dragonite go down to T-Bolt. There it goes. I get it a little bit. I think Steve needed to use Blissey here and start going to town. It looks to me like Steve's worried about Focus Ashes and desired to get Hazards up, as we see Ferrothorn is going to be the play to come in next. While I understand, I think Regieleki coming in on Dragonite was the sign that it was Specs. I'm sure it was a big surprise at Specs. I don't know, this was a tough play to make, but I think Dragonite still had some use as a decent punish to things like Corviknight coming in maybe, and Barra is so important to get going. I guess if Stealth Rock was so important, you could swap out to Pharaoh, but I guess Steve was expecting Volt Switch and to survive. But I don't see Chad ever really falling for that. Oh, well, no more Dragonite. That was 75% or so that ended up not really being used because Regieleki just came in and destroyed it. And as we can see, this is the only resist Steve even has to Regieleki. Blissey almost kind of counts, but Regieleki going to town is another story for potentially later in the match. So, yes, you do need to get up rocks now that you have Ferrothorn in. However, Chad also makes a great play by going into Celebi because he desperately needs this to be healthy to deal with the Baroscuda. Yes, you can get up your rocks, but you can't Leech Seed, you can't deal with Recover. So yes, Celebi is going to get back to being pretty healthy. After a knockoff removes the Rocky Helmet, he'll be down to 50%. This is somewhat even trade. Pharaoh isn't doing anything at all at this point. So Steve is going to swap into the Blissey, who doesn't care about the incoming Thunderwave. Though I really do wish that Chad had recovered again here, just to keep healthy. I don't think Ferrothorn was doing much of anything to him. Knockoff, we saw did 30, what was going to do 20, oh no, you're down to 80%. I think Chad probably should have stayed in and kept the Celebi healthy here. but that was not me playing the game, and he Thunder Waved, and Thunder Wave can still obviously come in handy. It's very important to try to get those. We saw what happened earlier with the Necrozma whenever a full paralysis happened. So I totally get that play. I totally understand. And speaking of the follow-up, U-turn makes sense to avoid any shenanigans from Blissey, such as its own T-Wave, so I guess it's fine. We see the full para already coming into effect, so maybe a little bit of egg on my face, I don't know, but that's also kind of important there. Coco, it comes in, Steve gets full paired again. That was a Rain Dance turn that Steve doesn't get. I know that's what he wanted to do and then teleport out. But instead, we get to wait another turn, and Chad actually defogs. That's not Volt Switch, but I guess he sees the rocks hurting him more than Steve, and his rocker is still up, so it's no problem, but he is locked, and Steve gets his Rain Dance off anyways. Would have loved to see what Chad would have locked into if he saw the Rain Dance a turn earlier without the para. Now this is an interesting situation that Chad is locked in. He has to switch. He has to swap. I think it's a good decision to go into the Celebi as we get a third full para. That matters for sure too. Crunch would have been a 2-8 KO on anything if he brought in the Baroscuda, unless he swapped into Coco, and Liquidation could have KO'd anything but the Celebi that was in front of him. So odds are he could have gotten a KO there unless Chad was switching around too much and taking a whole lot of chip on everything he had left. Of course, that teleport on this turn got parried out. So now Celebi is in, and they have to play around each other. Celebi can stay and recover up, or can swap into another answer. We get an interesting turn here. Steve can hard switch potentially. He doesn't want to get Bear paralyzed, so we have a double switch here. They both swap into the Nidoking and Ferrothorn. Crazy switching. Steve is adamant about getting his rocks back up just via the safe double, and Chad sees an opportunity to get a free hit off with his nearly dead Nidoking. Remember, everything Nidoking does here is extra credit, thanks to the poor luck from earlier. But in this case, Steve is going to be the one to take advantage of Nidoking's survival. Yes, Ferrothorn takes 77%. A max roll, by the way, but he does survive without needing to click Endure. And Iron Barbs takes out Nidoking, and rocks are back up. And if that were enough, he has the Custat Berry on top of that too. That trick is ready. Whatever comes in is going to go down after being at 1%. It does end up being the Coco. Maybe it would have been nice for a physical attack that could have then died to the Iron Barbs immediately, but having rocks up accomplishes basically the same thing. So yes, he does get the Endeavor off on Coco. This all kind of worked out in his favor after some poor luck earlier, and now that it goes down to 2 Volt Switch, Coco is essentially down as well. So Ferrothorn set up rocks twice this match and KO'd Nidoking and essentially Coco as well before going down to Volt Switch. The score says 5-3, but it's really 4-3, and Steve's 3 are his Rain Sweeper and 2 Rain Setters. With 3 Rain turns left, Baroscuda is going to come in and look to claim some KOs. If you're astute as some of our live viewers, we knew at this point there was one particular role this would come down to. After Corv goes into Band Liquidation and Coco goes down to rocks for some reason, we're on to Baroscuda versus Celebi. Baro was Steve's proudest set when we talked, seeing multiple team members centered around setting up for it. On the other side, Celebi was the member he wasn't necessarily expecting or thinking about, and Chad was most uncertain about this set. Here we see just how important it was to bring that physically defensive Celebi with maybe not enough physical defense. And Chad also did not take the time to click Recover earlier, leaving with just 38% after rocks. Now then, is Choice Band Liquidation in the rain enough to take down the Celebi? If so, this is essentially game. Baroscuda can have rain set up for it one more time, and with that can outspeed the Regieleki and Weavile and KO them both. If Steve takes out the Celebi here, that's game. If Chad can survive, recover up, it becomes much, much harder for Baroscuda to take down the team, knowing that Celebi can come in at any time. Let's see. Well, according to the calcs here, Chad was actually always going to live with a max roll bringing him down to just 1 or 2 HP left. He does click Recover. Chad surviving on 3% again, but this time it isn't hacks. It's just enough defense investment. The only chance Steve really had here was better rolls earlier. Although Necrozma's higher roll and Ferrothorn's lower roll together even out to about average, he would have really needed 3 good rolls on his hits to bring down the Celebi. Another interesting point is that Steve's Baroscuda is Jolly here, and Adamant Liquidation in the rain would have been about a 50-50 chance to KO, so maybe something to think about there compared to Jolly, which was used to outspeed Scarfaleki in particular. Maybe if Steve hadn't worried about that, he could have walked with an easy Rain Dance sweep, as a KO there would have been the game. As it is, Celebi clicked Recover and is ready to take another hit. That said, Chad makes another crazy play here, and actually on the switch, U-turns out instead of clicking Recover again, which is kind of crazy. Steve was hoping to get the rain up again as soon as possible, but Chad sussed him out with a Weavile swap that could very much spell the end of the game. Blissey will click Protect here to end the electric terrain at least, and he knows that if Chad is locked in triple axle, if he's choice, that's what he's locked into. So speaking of, 1, 2, 3 hits on triple axle, and Blissey goes down. I think this was the last turn that really mattered right there. Yes, Steve still has a rain setter and a rain sweeper, but Regieleki does too much to these two, and between Alecki and Celebi, Chad should be able to go in finishing off the last 2 bonds. How does Steve break Celebi? With a predicted switch and using Crunch. However, being locked into one move means that Regieleki just needs to come in on Baroscuda without rain being up, and it's over. Or if it's just locked into Crunch, Regieleki can come in, survive a hit, and KO back. Basically, it's not really possible for Steve to KO Celebi while still being able to have rain up and Baroscuda locked into liquidation. See, so he's going to go for Baroscuda, and this will switch into Celebi. Steve Flip turns into the Clefable. Okay, let's see, predicted switch and Crunched. Regieleki comes in, clicks T-Bolt 3 times and wins. He gets parried and swaps to Baroscuda. We kind of see this happening. If he had clicked anything but Teleport, Celebi recovers, and it wasn't exactly in danger, especially from this Clef set. Steve's only hope is that Clef can survive 2 T-Bolts and Rain Dance for Barra, but Alecki does 54 to 63. That's another max roll, by the way, on that Clef, so that wasn't going to be possible. Baroscuda's Aquajet crit had a 12.5% chance to OHKO the Alecki there, another 12.5% chance to KO the Weavile, but it doesn't even get the crit and goes down. In the end, Celebi and Regieleki clutch it out for Chad as he wins 2-0 in the finals. Big congrats to Chad in his first WCL victory after 4 losses prior. He gets it here in Season 7. Great game played to both him and to SteveChuck. I think we've gone over everything in pretty good detail here, so I think that'll wrap things up. Thank you for stopping by. Hope you stick around for more Wooper Club League content. Season 8 is coming up soon as we go into a traditional draft, so please stay tuned for that. See ya.